Anger at the pump. How Trump's war became an electoral nightmare for Republicans. A packed town hall in Norfolk, Nebraska. On stage stands Republican Congressman Mike Flood, representing one of the most reliably Republican districts in America. A district that has not voted Democratic since 1964. A district where Trump won by 21 percentage points in 2024. Then, a woman rises. Not a political activist, not a Democrat, not a journalist, just an ordinary mother buying groceries for her children every week. She looks at Flood and shouts. The crowd erupts in applause in Nebraska, in Republican territory, in the heart of conservative America. This is not a story about Democrats. It is a story about Republican voters beginning to lose patience. Today, we tell the story of how the Iran war evolved from the short military operation Trump promised into an electoral crisis that could threaten Republican control in the 2026 midterm elections. A story about how the gas pump became a political battlefield, every bit as important as the Strait of Hormuz. A story of public frustration shaking one of the strongest political coalitions in America. Come with me, because this story has rarely been told in its full depth. It was the evening of May 23rd in Norfolk, Nebraska. Congressman Mike Flood was holding only his second town hall meeting of the year. The first had already been tense. This one was worse. The audience was not simply angry, they were exhausted, frustrated, disappointed. One voter accused Flood of losing touch with ordinary people after arriving in Washington. Another declared that the war was making everyday life unaffordable, and that sentiment echoed throughout the room. What was Flood's response? A highly defensive one. He pointed to intelligence briefings from military leaders and senior administration officials. He argued that the United States had significantly weakened Iran's ability to cause further harm. But the audience was unconvinced, because they were living in a different reality. A reality measured in dollars at the gas station, not military assessments in briefing rooms. The irony was striking. The same congressman defending the war also criticized parts of the Trump administration on other issues, warning against creating special compensation funds for individuals convicted of violence against law enforcement. That moment revealed a growing dilemma inside the Republican Party, caught between an increasingly frustrated voter base and a president unwilling to retreat. The numbers help explain the anger. Before the war, in February 2026, the average price of regular gasoline in America stood at roughly $2.98 per gallon. Trump regularly celebrated low fuel prices as proof of economic success. By May 2026, that figure had surged to $4.52 per gallon. Diesel climbed above $5.60. Premium gasoline surpassed $5.30. In parts of California, prices moved beyond $6 per gallon. Trump responded by assuring Americans that fuel prices would drop dramatically once the war ended. But the very next day, prices moved even higher. And these are not merely statistics, they are daily realities. Amy Van Dyne of Colorado told reporters, "I used to fill my tank for $36. Now $36 only gets me half a tank." Her co-worker, Tanya Pruitt, offered an even harsher assessment. "We're putting money into the gas tanks instead of putting food on the table." These are not Democratic voters. These are Republican voters living in counties that overwhelmingly supported Trump. Many still support him, but their patience is beginning to wear thin. Trump insists prices will fall rapidly after the conflict ends. Energy analysts are far less certain. Patrick DeHaan of GasBuddy argues that only a complete restoration of oil traffic through the Strait of Hormuz would significantly reduce prices. Even then, he says it would take weeks before oil shipments normalize. Others are even more pessimistic. Some analysts believe Americans may not see pre-war fuel prices return until the second half of 2027, more than a year away, and gasoline is only part of the problem. Reduced refinery output, growing demand for jet fuel, and supply disruptions have increased transportation costs across the economy. Airfares are rising, shipping costs are rising. Imported goods are becoming more expensive. Everything is connected. As one political analyst observed, high gasoline prices are kryptonite for American politicians because voters are reminded of them every time they fill up their cars. Now let's look at the numbers that worry Republicans most. According to a New York Times and Siena College poll, Trump's approval rating stands at just 37%. Roughly two-thirds of voters believe launching the war against Iran was a mistake. Only 24% believe the war has been worth the cost. 64% disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy. Only 28% approve of his response to the cost of living crisis. Among independent voters, 69% disapprove of Trump's performance. Nearly half say his policies have personally harmed them. Three-quarters believe the war was the wrong decision. In a hypothetical congressional election, Democrats lead Republicans by 50% to 39%. Among independents, the gap is even larger. These numbers are alarming for Republicans because midterm elections traditionally become a referendum on the sitting president, and a president sitting at 37% approval creates a difficult political environment. Political analysts argue that Trump has struggled to clearly explain the purpose of the war or define a convincing long-term strategy. For many Americans, the question remains simple: why are we fighting a war that is making life more expensive? And why does nobody seem able to explain when it will end? Yet writing off Republican support would be a mistake. Many Republican voters continue backing the war despite the economic pain. Polling shows that a large majority of Republican voters support renewed military action if negotiations with Iran fail. Many also believe the campaign will ultimately eliminate Iran's nuclear threat. Some voters openly acknowledge the costs, but they see them as necessary. One Republican voter put it this way: "I'm hurting like everyone else, but I'm willing to sacrifice a little." Another said, "I hate high gas prices, but I fear a nuclear Iran even more." When asked whether anything could shake her support for Trump, she answered, "No, I'm all on board." That is the challenge facing Democrats. Trump's core base remains remarkably loyal. 37% approval may be low historically, but it still represents tens of millions of committed voters. The real battle lies elsewhere, among suburban voters, among independents, and there, the damage appears much deeper. Let's summarize what we've learned today. Voters are confronting Republican lawmakers. Even in the safest Republican districts, gasoline prices have risen by roughly 50%, with experts warning that relief may still be far away. Trump's approval rating has fallen to 37%. While opposition to the war continues to grow, Democrats currently hold a significant advantage in hypothetical election matchups. Yet Trump's political base remains largely intact, with many supporters still willing to endure economic hardship. And that leaves one critical question hanging in the air tonight. If this war continues for another month, or 2 months, or until Election Day, how many Republican voters will move from saying, "I'm all on board," to saying, "I simply can't afford this anymore"? How many voters like Amy Van Dyne and Tanya Pruitt, paying more for fuel, groceries, and daily necessities, will finally lose patience? How many lawmakers like Mike Flood can continue defending a war with no visible end? And will the president eventually recognize that the economy is not just numbers on a chart, but dinners families cannot afford, vacations they can no longer take, and futures they can no longer plan for? The cry we heard in Norfolk was not merely a local complaint, it was a warning signal for Washington. Republicans either find a convincing way to end this conflict, or they may pay the political price in November. Because the real battle may not be fought in the Strait of Hormuz, it may be fought at gas stations across America. And the clock is ticking. Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive all our new videos. See you in the next video.